Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode we added looting into our game, and in this episode we're going to continue working on other things. One of the things that I saw many of you asking is to create a storage box. So that's exactly what we're going to do in this episode. We're going to be able to craft a storage box and place it anywhere in the world, and then we can access it and store things inside. Of course, you don't have to craft this. It can be an item that already exists in your world. It depends on your game. But the point is that we're going to have a separate place to store our different things, and we can have as many storage boxes as we want, and each one will contain different items. The first thing we're going to do is open our resources folder, and inside we're going to select one of our inventory items, for example the wall, and we're going to press Ctrl D and duplicate it. Then we're going to rename it to storage box and also change the name inside the inspector. We're also going to change the description and the sprite of this inventory item. So I'm going to use this chest icon, and I'm going to change the description to something like... In our case, we don't need to touch anything else because all of these things are set exactly to what we want. Nothing should be selected, only the is usable and is trashable. And of course, we don't want any effects. Next, we're going to create the storage box model, and I'm going to use this free low poly chest, but of course you can use any model that you like. If you decided to use the same low poly chest, then we need to do a few things before we can use it. First of all, we go into our mesh folder, we select the old chest, and over here we need to enable read and write, because later in this episode we're going to do a few things that require this option. And of course, when you select this, you go and press on apply. Next, if you're using URP, you should go to the materials, select all of these materials because there will probably be pink, and then you go to edit, render pipeline, universal render pipeline, and upgrade selected materials to URP, and then it's going to convert them to a regular material. Now that all of this is done, we can go to our prefabs and we can drag the old chest into the scene. We're going to unpack it from being a prefab and rename it to storage box. Then we're going to add two box colliders, and one of them will be trigger. Of course, make sure that they fit exactly to the model. Then we're going to add a rigid body to it. And we're going to lock all the rotations. Next, we're going to add this quick outline to our model, and we're going to use it when we want to place our model in the environment. So we're going to make it green if it's a valid location, and we're going to make it red if it's an invalid location. So after you imported this into your project, you don't need to go to the folder itself. You simply need to add it over here, so outline, and just make sure that you're not selecting the built-in outline. We want this outline script. Over here, we're going to change it to be outline and silhouette. Of course, you can play around with this, and we're going to change the color from the script later. And we're going to disable it in the beginning because we don't want to see this outline as default. Now, if you remember, when we worked on our construction system, we instantiated the item in front of the player, and then we just walked around and we decided where to place it. So we're going to do the same thing with this box. So if we open our player, we can find this construction holder, but if you're not using the construction system, you can just create an empty object inside your player and name it something like placement holder, and then we're going to instantiate this box inside this holder. Now, in order to find the exact position, we're going to drag this storage box model inside this holder, and then we're going to reset all the position. And then you simply need to find the exact position for your model. For me, it's going to be something like 1 on the Y, 3 on the Z, 40 on the X rotation, and 180 on the Y rotation. So this is the position it's going to get instantiated in the beginning. Now that we have the exact position that we want, we're going to make it into a prefab, and we're going to drag it into our resources folder, because over here we have all the other models that we want to instantiate. Then we're going to delete it from the scene. Next, we're going to open our inventory item script, and over here, when we have this option to use the item. So this is only applicable for items that are usable. It's going to call this method, and then it's going to check what is the item that we're clicking. So for now we have this foundation and the wall, but we're going to add another case for the storage box. And don't get confused. If you don't want to use the construction system, you still don't have to. This is something that is going to happen when we click on this item inside our inventory. So then it's going to check if it's usable, and if it's usable, it's going to run this method. Of course, we're going to place this in another place, and then you're not going to have to use the construction system. So don't worry about this. It's going to be a completely separate system. Over here, we're going to add 2 more cases. So the reason we created 2 different cases is because one of them is going to be for testing if we drag our storage box inventory item inside the inventory without actually crafting it. And maybe we want to do it for testing. We don't want to craft it each time to test it. Eventually, we're going to delete this case and only use this one, because it will always have this clone addition when we craft it. Now, because we want to separate between the construction items and the placement items, we're going to scroll over here when we use this item, and we're going to take this and place it only inside the cases that are relevant to the construction system. So these cases will take us into the construction system, and these cases will take us into the placement system. And this way, you don't have to use the construction system at all. Now we want to see if it works, so we're going to expand our canvas, our inventory screen, and over here we have our slots. So we have this axe for testing, and we're going to do the same thing for the storage box. So we're going to take the storage box inventory item and drag it into the second slot. So now when we start the game, we have it inside the inventory, and we don't need to waste time on crafting it. So let's see if it actually works. So when we click on this item, it should print clicked on the storage box. So now when we open the inventory and we right click on this item, it says clicked on storage box. So as I told you, we want to create a separate system for placing items inside the world. We don't want to use the construction system. The construction system will be only for building things, and maybe you don't like the system, maybe you have a grid-based system, and I would also prefer a grid-based system, but our game has a lot of hills and it's something that is not going to work. Maybe in the future I'm going to create a better construction system, so it's going to be much easier to replace it. That's why we want to create a placement system that is going to be completely separate. So over here we create a new empty object and we name it placement system. Then we add a new script with the same name. The placement system script will be very similar to the construction system, but it's going to be much shorter because we're not going to have all the extra things that go into the construction system. And in order for you not to waste time on typing this out, I'm going to provide you the entire script in the description. And inside you're going to copy all the different namespaces and the entire class, so make sure you select everything and copy. And then select everything inside the script and simply delete and Control V to paste it. So now this script will be the exact script that I'm going to see in front of me. Now we're going to see a few errors over here, but we're going to deal with them. First of all, of course, we make it into a singleton because we want to be able to access it from different parts of our code. Then we have a reference to our placement holding spot. And this is what I talked about. We had this construction holder before, so you can use this construction holder or you can create a different placement holder. It doesn't matter, but we need a reference to it in order to instantiate the other items that we want to place. Then we also want a reference to the environment placeables, and this is just an object that is going to contain all these items that we place inside the world. So we can go over here and we can collapse this. And if we expand our environment, we have all these different categories, trees, animals, items. Now, if we place the storage box, we can definitely just instantiate it and place it in the root of our scene. But later, when we want to implement some kind of saving system, it's going to be much harder to locate all of these items. That's why it's a good idea to store them inside a specific game object. So we're going to create a new game object and we're going to name it Placeables. And this will be this game object. Then we also have a boolean that will tell us if we're inside placement mode. We have a boolean to let us know if it's a valid placement for our item. Then we have a reference to the item to be placed, and also we have a reference to the inventory item that we want to destroy. So it's very similar to the construction system. So let's see how it works. First of all, we're going to check out our update method. So over here we check if we're inside placement mode, and if we are, we're going to display some kind of UI, but we're going to deal with this later. Then we're going to check if we have an item to be placed, and if we're inside the placement mode, then we can check if the placement is valid for the item. Then if it is, then we're going to set this boolean to be true, and we're also going to set the color of the outline to be the valid color. And of course, if it's not valid, then we're going to set the invalid color. Now, if the placement is valid, and we're inside the placement mode and we click on the left mouse button, then it means that we can actually place the item, and we're going to place the item freestyle. Then we're also going to destroy the item from our inventory. But if we press on the X key, it's going to cancel the placement. So it's going to set the inventory item to be visible, it's going to destroy the model, and it's going to make the placement mode to be false. Now we have a few more methods. We have this method that checks if it's a valid position, and for this we're going to enter into the placeable item, and inside we're going to check if this item is valid to be built. But we're going to talk about this when we enter inside the placeable item. Now, after we click on the button and place the item, we're going to call this place item freestyle, and this is this method over here. So we're going to take this item to be placed, and we're going to set the parent to be this environment placeable. So we're talking about this game object. So we're going to place it inside this game object. Then we're going to set the default color. So it simply means that we're going to disable the outline, and we're also going to disable this placeable item script, because right now that the storage box is on the floor, we don't need this anymore. Then of course we're going to exit the placement mode. We have this destroy item method to destroy the item from our inventory, but we had this also inside the construction system. All of this will happen when we actually place the item on the floor. But if we scroll over here, we have this activate placement mode, and this will happen when we actually click on the item inside the inventory. So we can copy this method and we can go into our inventory item, and over here, instead of printing this, we're going to call this method. Of course, we need to first go into our placement system, and we need to pass inside the name of the item that we want to place. So it's the same way we did with the foundation model and the wall model. So just make sure that this name is exactly the same name as the item that we have over here. And we're going to do the same thing over here for the testing. Another thing that we want to do is set the inventory item to be destroyed, because over here, when we actually set this item, we also destroy the inventory item, right? Because if we clicked on the storage box, we should not have it anymore inside our inventory. So we need to set this before we even start the placement system. So right now it's a serialized field, so we won't be able to access it from another script. So let's make it public. And then over here, we're going to add this. And we're going to set it to be this game object, because this game object is actually the inventory item that we have inside our inventory. And we also want to do the same thing over here. Next, we want to create this placeable item class. So we're going to create a new script. And you can find a link to this entire script in the description as well. So you simply copy everything and you paste this. Now at this point you should not see any errors, and if you do see any errors, then something went wrong along the way, so just make sure you follow correctly. Now let's go over the script so you understand what is going on. First of all, we have two booleans to let us know if we are grounded and if we are overlapping. And we are doing this check over here. So only if we're grounded and we're not overlapping any items, this will become true. Then we also have a reference to the solid box collider, and this is something that we're going to use later. And we have a reference to our outline script. Now in the start, we're going to get the outline component and store it over here. In the update, after we do this check, we also want to send arraycast to actually check if we're hitting the ground. Now, in order to prevent us from placing the item under the ground, we also want to check if it's more than the box height, and then we multiply it by half of its size. So only if half of the storage box is underground, we will be able to place it. After the update, we also have these on triggers. So over here, we simply check if the item that we're holding is hitting something. So if it's hitting a tree or some pickable item, then it means that it's overlapping an item, and it means that we won't be able to place it. Over here, we also set it to be is grounded if it's hitting the ground, but we also want to make the object be parallel to the ground. So we're simply changing the rotation to fit the ground. So if there's some kind of little hill, it's going to rotate and it's going to look better. Then we also have this on trigger exit, and this is just to know that we are no longer hitting the ground and we are no longer overlapping items. And we also have these methods to set the colors. So when we want to set the invalid color, we're simply going into our outline script and we're changing the outline color to be red, and valid color will be green, and default color, we're simply going to disable the outline. And that's all for the PlacebleItem script. Now back inside Unity, we're going to open our resources, we're going to select the storage box, and we're going to add this placeable item. Now I noticed that this is not the correct spelling, but it doesn't matter. Again, as long as this has the same name as the class inside. Now over here, the only thing we need to do is take our solid box collider. So the solid one is the one without the is trigger, and we're going to drag it into this reference. Then we're going to select our placement system, and we need to add all of these references. So for the placement holding spot, as I told you, you can create another empty object, but we're going to use this construction holder. For the environment placeables, we're going to take this placeables object and we're going to set it over here. Another thing that I forgot to tell you is on our storage box, we go to our rigid body and we need to disable the gravity, but we need to enable is kinematic. Now when we run the game and we right click on this storage box, it's going to appear in front of the player and we can walk around. And now we can also see this red outline. It means that this is not a valid place. We cannot just place it in the air. But if we rotate and look on the ground, then it's going to get this green outline, and we can also see the silhouette. So the silhouette is this part that is completely green. So we can also make it just an outline, we can make it an outline and a silhouette, but I used outline and silhouette, and this is helpful to let us know how far are we inside. So you also notice that when we go beyond 50% of the model, it's going to become red. It means that we cannot place it over here. We need to have at least 50% of the height to place it. And this is very helpful. You can also see that the rotation is adjusted depending on the angle. So for example, over here we have some kind of hill, so it's going to adjust itself. You can see. And then when we finally found a good spot, we click on the left mouse button and it's going to place this item on the floor. Next, we also want to add some kind of UI to let us know if we're inside the placement mode. So we're going to open our canvas over here and we're going to open this construction mode UI. We're going to press Ctrl D to duplicate this. We're going to enable it and now we can see it over here. We're going to rename it to be Placement Mode UI. And inside, we're simply going to change the title to be in Placement Mode. And that's basically it. So we're going to hide it, and then inside the placement system script, we're going to scroll to this part over here inside the update, and we're going to add the code to show it or hide it when necessary. Of course, we first need to have a reference, so let's add a reference. And then if we're inside placement mode, we're simply going to set it to be active, and if we're not, we're going to set it to be inactive. Then we need to drag it inside the reference of the placement system. And when we click on the storage box, it's going to show us this UI. And we know that we can press on X to cancel or click the left mouse button to place it. So for example, we want to delete this, so we're simply going to press on X. Now you probably noticed the error that I got when I pressed on X, and that's just because inside our construction manager, we also have an option to press on X to close the construction manager. So when we press on X, it simply throws us an error because it expects us to work with the construction system. So in this case, we're going to fix this, and that's just if you're also using the construction system. So another condition will be only if we're inside the construction mode. If we're not inside the construction mode, this is not relevant. So now we are done with the placement of the item, and the next thing we want to do is take care of actually interacting with this item. We want to be able to open it and see all the things inside. We want to take things out of it, put things inside of it, because that's the main purpose of this item. Of course, if you're just using it for another item, for example, some kind of accessory or some kind of statue that has no functionality, you can use this same exact script to just place around different things. But now for the storage box, we want to have also the storage functionality. So for this, we're going to create a new script and we're going to name it storage box. So inside the storage box, we first want to know if the player is close to the storage box, because only if it's close enough, he will be able to open it and interact with it. And usually we do some simple on triggers to know if the player is actually triggering the box collider, but we are already using this isTrigger box collider to check if the storage box is overlapping items or if it's hitting the ground. So we won't be able to use it to detect the player. That's why we need to find a different approach. So inside the storage box, we're going to add some code. So over here we get the distance between the player and this storage box. And to do this, we get the player body transform, and we can actually find it inside the player state instance. And this is a singleton that we created before, and it has a reference to the player body, because we cannot just drag a reference to the player inside the storage box. And of course, we have the transform position of the storage box. Then we get the distance, and then we check if the distance is smaller than 10, it means that the player is in range, and if not, the player is not in range. Of course, you can change this. You can also take this out and create some kind of variable that you can change in the inspector. I calculated this, and 10 is a good number. Now we're also going to add a few more things that we're going to use later. So first of all, we're going to have a list of strings, and these will be the names of all the items that we have inside the storage box. Then we're also going to create some kind of enum to have different types of boxes, because maybe you want to have different boxes, a small box, a big box. So you want to be able to use this information later when you get different prefabs for different boxes. And of course, we set this box type inside the inspector. So in our example, it's going to be a small box, but it can also be a big box, and you're going to see how we use it. Now, in order to interact with the box, we want to go to the selection manager, because this is the place we add the code to interact with different items. And over here inside the update, where we have all the NPC, choppable tree, animal, and all these things that we interact with, we also want to add some code for the storage box. So we're going to add some code, and it's going to be very similar to these things that we already have. And we also want to create this at the top. So the code is very similar to the other things that we had. We simply first get the storage box component, and then we also check if the player is in range. And if we really hit a storage box with this raycast, and the player is in range, then we're going to display this open text, and we're going to set this selected storage box to be this game object. And this is just so we have a reference to the selected storage box at all time. Then we also scroll over here to the bottom of the update method, and we want to add another condition because we want to hide the UI when it's not a storage box. Next, over here, we also want to add another condition, and the condition is that we are not in site placement mode because we don't want to see this open UI when we're in site placement mode and we still did not place the item. And we basically don't want to even interact with the storage box if we're still in site placement mode. So let's add over here. Now, in order to see if it works, we need to add the storage box script on our storage box model. And we don't need to change anything over here. And now if we place this box, we are going to see this open text over here. Now, it's a problem that when we place it, it appears immediately and it doesn't look very well, but we're going to fix this later. But it works correctly. And if I go out of range, it's going to disappear. Now we want to actually open the box. So we're going to open our canvas over here, and we're going to duplicate our inventory screen, Control D. Then we're going to open it. And we're also going to open and enable our inventory screen just to see the positioning. We're going to rename this one to be. We're going to delete all the things inside, so we're going to delete this trash, this item info panel, and all the slots except 8 slots. Then we're also going to remove these items from inside, and then we're going to press on this and we're going to drag it to the side. So let's also open the scene view. So this UI will be just relevant for the storage box small. So if you want to create a bigger storage box with more slots, you can simply create another UI for it, because we're going to use a storage manager to switch and open different UIs. Now, of course, there's a lot of different ways. You can also create some kind of grid layout and then just instantiate different slots, but it's going to be a problem to do this with our existing inventory system. So I'm going to do this. It's going to be much simpler, but of course you can do it in other ways if you like to. So we're going to create this new singleton. We're going to name it Storage Manager. And we're going to add the same script. Again, because it's a very long script, I'm going to provide you a link in the description. So simply copy everything, copy, and paste it over here. So let's go over this quickly. First of all, we have a reference to our storage box UI. And of course, if you're going to have more storage boxes UIs, for example, you're going to have a big box with more slots, then you can just create another one and name it storage box big. and then you can simply use it instead of this one. Then we also have a reference to our actual storage box script. Then we also have a boolean that is going to let us know if the UI is opened or not. Over here, we open the box. So before we open the box, we want to know which storage box it's going to populate. So over here, we set the selected storage, right? This is the storage box that we passed inside. Then we want to get the relevant UI, and we want to populate the UI using this storage box. Then we also want to activate the actual UI. We want to set the storage UI open boolean to be true. And we also want to make sure that we can use the cursor when the menu is opened. Then we also get the relevant UI and we pass inside the selected storage. And for now, it will simply return us this storage box small UI. But if you have many more types of storage boxes, this is where you can create some kind of switch case statement, and then you can check if the storage box is a small box and it uses this small box enum, then return this storage box small UI. If it's a big box, then return a different prefab. Then return the storage box big UI that we did not create. And it's simply going to be a different UI that is going to have more slots inside. Then we also have this close box, and it's going to do the opposite. It's going to close the UI, it's going to set this to be false, and it's going to lock the cursor, and it's going to enable the things that we want to interact with. Now, in order to actually open the box, we are going to call this open box method, and we're going to do it inside our selection manager. So inside the selection manager, when we actually hover over the box and we see this open text, and we also set the storage box to be the selected storage box, we are going to check if the player is pressing the left mouse button, and then if he is, he's going to open the box. And inside we're going to pass a reference to the storage box. And because I told you that when we place the box, it will immediately show us this open text and it doesn't look nice, then we're going to go to our placement system. And over here, we're going to add some kind of delay before we set it back to be false. So only when 1 second is going to pass, it's going to become false, and then this open text is going to be displayed. So let's add an enumerator over here. And then we're simply going to make this false after 1 second. And then we're going to start the coroutine. So when we place the item, it's going to wait 1 second, and only then it's going to become false. And then this will become false, and this condition is going to be met. So we're going to see this open text. Now we need to do a few more changes in order for everything to work. For example, we need to disable the mouse movement when the menu is opened. So we're going to open our mouse movement script, and we're going to add another condition over here. And unlike the other menus, like the inventory menu, we don't want to allow the player to walk around when the storage box is open, because we want him to always stay close to the storage box. So we also want to disable the movement. So we're going to add another condition over here. Now, when the storage box menu is opened, we're going to be able to take things from the inventory and drag them into the box, and we're going to be able to take things out of the box into the inventory, and that's just because these slots all have these item slot scripts, and all our items have the drag and drop script, so it's going to work the same way as the inventory system. Now, we open this menu by clicking on the box, but what if we want to close this menu? For this, we're going to add some kind of button to simply close the storage box. So over here inside the storage box UI, we're going to add a button, and we're going to make it about 50-50. And we're going to position it over here at the top. We're going to find some kind of sprite. I'm going to use this X. We're also going to remove the text from the button. And then when we click on this button, we're going to add an onClick event. And over here, we're going to drag the storage manager, and we're going to run a method that will be this close box method. Now we also want to see that this is working, so let's disable the storage box UI. Let's also disable the inventory screen. And of course, we also need to drag this reference into the storage manager. So the storage box small should go over here into the storage box small. So now when we craft this box and we place it, then after a second, it's going to be interactable, and then we can click on it and it's going to open this UI. Then we can go over here, we can take the axe and drag it inside, we can drag it back, we can close this, and we can close the inventory. Now we can go back into our storage manager and we can look at this populate storage method. So over here we have a list of UI slots. Then we go over all of our UI slots and we add them into this list. And then we simply do a for each loop over all the items inside the selected storage, right? Because over here we have a list of all the items inside the storage. And then for each slot that we have, so for example, we have 8 slots, then for each slot, it's going to check if there is nothing inside the slot, right? If there is no child, then we're going to instantiate this item and we're going to use this name, right? So over here, it's going to be stored as a string, and we're going to use these names to instantiate an actual inventory item. And then we're going to set them to be the child of this slot. And we're also going to break, so it's going to skip this entire for each and it's going to move on to the next name. And we can see this in action if I run the game and then I craft this box and I place it over here, and we can find the model over here inside the placeables, and we have the storage box script. So if I add an item, and this item will be an axe. So these can only be items that we already have inside the resources. So it can be an axe, it can be a foundation, it can be a log, it can be a raw meat, all of these inventory items. So we're going to make one axe appear inside. And then when we actually press on this box, we're going to see an axe inside because it took this name, this string, and it converted it into an actual inventory item. It looked for this name inside our inventory items and it found this axe and it placed it over here. And now I can take this axe and move it to the inventory. And of course, we already have this axe. I can click on it. It's going to be equipped and I can select it and use it. Now, the problem is if we have this opened, and we have the inventory screen open, and we drag an item from the inventory into our storage, then it's going to actually take this item and it's going to place it inside the UI. And it's going to sit under one slot. But we don't need this. We only need the name of this item. So for this, we need to create another method that is going to convert the actual inventory items that we get over here into strings, and then it's going to store it inside this list over here. And we're going to do this when we actually close the box. So when we finally moved everything we want, we are going to close the box and it's going to basically recalculate all the storage and it's going to convert everything into strings. So we're going to create this method over here. And we also need to pass in the actual relevant UI. So we're going to copy this and paste this inside, and then we can generate this method. And it's going to be a rather long method, but I don't want you to be lazy and always get all the code. So you should also get your hand dirty and type some code. So over here, we're doing almost the opposite of what we did inside the populate storage. We first get a reference to all of these UI slots, then we clear all the items inside the selected storage because we want to get new items, we want to get new strings. Then we also create a list for all the items that we want to delete. And then we just loop over all the different slots. And if the slot has more than 0 children, it means that it has 1 child. And then it means that we have something inside. We're also going to remove this clone text that we always get. And then we're going to add the result to our items list. So if we had an axe and 2 stones, then it's going to take them and it's going to convert them into strings and it's going to place them inside this list over here inside the storage box. Then we're also going to add this item into the to be deleted list and simply destroy all these items, right? Because if I drag this axe over here, then it's going to appear inside the UI like that. But we don't need anything inside the storage box. We only need the name of this axe, right? So that's why we're going to delete all of these items after we convert them into strings. Now let's close this and let's also close the inventory. Another thing that we need to change is inside the storage manager, inside the populate storage, there is a small fix. That's why you didn't get this code inside the paste bin. So over here, after this item to add, we also want to set his name to be the name of the item that we want to instantiate. And this is again just to prevent some bugs. If we get a clone addition to the name, then it's going to not instantiate it as needed. So over here, item to add name equals to name. Now we're basically done with the storage box, and the last thing we need to do is actually create a recipe for it and craft it. I'm going to fast forward this part if you want to see how it's done, but you should already know how to do it because we created so many recipes before, so it's very simple. So now we can craft this item over here, but we can also use this one for testing so we don't waste time. And then we can also place it. And now it's inside the world. We can open it. We can put things inside. So let's pick up a few stones and a stick. And then we can simply open it, open the inventory, drag these stones inside and this stick. And then we can close it, we can close the inventory, and we can just walk away and we can come back and these things will be inside. Of course, we can craft another one and place it in a different spot. We can craft 10 different ones and each one will store its own items. So that's basically it. And of course, you don't have to craft them. In your game, you can have some kind of closet that you have in the beginning of the game and it will be a storage. So this is just an option that you can add. So that's all for this episode. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not subscribed. Please leave a like and I'll see you next time.